My name is Chris Horak. I'm director of UCLA Film and Television Archive, and I'm also the curator of this series. My own interest in Lubitsch began over 40 years ago when I wrote my master's thesis at Boston University on Ernst Lubitsch and the rise of UFA. Focusing on Lubitsch's beginnings in Germany before World War I, I followed his rise from a comic actor to a world-famous film director of epic costume films, all produced for Germany's largest film company at the time, the Universum Film AG, which had been founded in 1917. Lubitsch, of course, went to Hollywood in 1922 and never looked back. In the early 1980s, I confronted Lubitsch again while writing my dissertation on German Jewish refugees to Hollywood. And while Lubitsch was not an emigre per se, he was a guiding light for the German emigre community, as well as the director of possibly the most sophisticated anti-Nazi film to come out of Hollywood during the war years, To Be or Not to Be, from 1942. While researching my thesis, I also interviewed the screenwriter Walter Reich, who literally worshipped the ground Lubitsch walked on. He told me that Lubitsch, even though he never took credit, was the author and worked on the scripts of every one of his films. He described how he and Billy Wilder would sit around the pool and just throw out ideas at Lubitsch, and Lubitsch would just pace back and forth, say yes, yes, no, maybe, do it better. So now I'd like to introduce our guest, Joseph McBride. McBride has published 18 books, including Steven Spielberg, a biography, Frank Capra, The Catastrophe of Success, 3 books on Orson Welles, 2 books on John Ford, and a very highly regarded interview book with Howard Hawks called Hawks on Hawks. McBride was critic and reporter for the Daily Variety for many years, and also a professor at the cinema department of San Francisco State University, where he taught screenwriting and film history. And of course, he has a long career as a filmmaker too, but that's another story. So without further ado, Joseph McBride. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. It's really nice of you to have me here and to have this fantastic Lubitsch series done at the same time my book is coming out. I'll just give a very brief introduction because I want to save time for our discussion with Nicola Lubitsch after the film, and it's wonderful to have her here. She's such a treasure. She and I we met back in 2010 when there was a Lubitsch series I curated in Locarno, Switzerland. We showed all of his films in best possible print. So you're going to see beautiful 35 millimeter prints of his films and a good selection of his films in both Germany and the US. Just to give you a little background on this wonderful film, this is a delightful, frothy comedy. Lubitsch made this toward the end of the silent period, 1926, and he was working for Warner Brothers. He was imported to America by Mary Pickford and made one film, and then Warner snapped him up. They were kind of a fledgling studio, supported by Rin Tin Tin, the German shepherd, supported the German director, basically. He was the moneymaker, and Lubitsch's films made money, but they weren't, big smashes, but they were tremendous critical successes. The critics and the fellow directors all thought Lubitsch was the greatest, and many of them learned from him, such as Hitchcock and Renoir and Wells and Ophuls, and you name them, just on and on. David Niven called him the master's master, which I think is a good phrase. And so Lubitsch was brought by Warner's to give prestige to the studio, and he had a lot of freedom as a result. And he made some extraordinary silent films for them. The Marriage Circle is a great, great film. I did there's a chapter from my book on Bright Light's website where they embed the Marriage Circle in it. You can watch it there, but watch it here too. And Lady Windermere's Fan is a wonderful film. The American silent period is among the hardest of his films to see, and one reason I wrote this book was a selfish reason, because I just wanted to see the films. They were inaccessible when I started. There were a few out on DVD. More and more have come out on DVD, but some have never come out in the United States. There are a few on YouTube only, and some I had to get from collectors, and I went to Europe to see the films. It was a real adventure and really fun. But so This Is Paris is one of these films that's kind of hard to see. He made these several classic films in the silent period, and you can see Marriage Circle and Lady Windermere is Found, but So This Is Paris has always been kind of mysteriously missing in action. And the prints, I have a tape of it that's very bad condition, kind of a bad dupe, and they've restored it, so it looks very nice, and you'll see a beautifully restored print. And this was the end of his time at Warner Brothers. They were getting tired of him not making a lot of money, and they were kind of getting Philistine about his work. You know, why don't you make a bigger film? And he said, well, why don't you give me more money to make a bigger film? You know, and they had gotten the benefits of the prestige, and the stock was rising and all that, and they felt they didn't need him anymore. They were very short-sighted, and they were getting interested in making sound pictures, and he became one of the best early sound filmmakers who helped create the musical. And so he did this film, and then he moved to MGM. But he once said, I've been to Paris, France, and I've been to Paris Paramount, and I prefer Paris Paramount. And this is not Paris Paramount, it's Paris Warner Brothers, but it's the same thing. It's his imaginary construction of Paris, which, you know, part of what he brought to American cinema was a continental sensibility about sex, adult sexuality, and adult relationships between men and women, much in advance of what we have today in American films. Usually is very juvenile. And I think the main interest for me in Lubitsch's films is a lot of risque sexual humor, but it's the way men and women treat each other. It's very complex in his films. The women are always fascinating characters, and quite often he has three-way relationships. He deals with unorthodox sexual relationships, and they're very complex and subtle, and a lot of his style is done in looks and gestures, and that's what fellow directors admired so much about him. And you'll see that in this film, and it's subtle, but lighthearted, but interesting commentary on relationships between the sexes. But I'll just say one more thing, that when I was in Locarno, I met Jean Duché, who's a distinguished elderly French critic, and he said he thought Lubitsch invented the musical with The Oyster Princess, which is a film made in 1919 in Germany, which is going to be part of the series. A wonderful, wild, zany film. And it was a silent film, and I said, well, what do you mean invented the musical? And there's a great sequence in there called the Foxtrot Epidemic, at a wedding where everybody breaks out into a foxtrot, and it's just tremendous, a musical number within a silent film. But of course, silent films were never silent. They had an orchestra playing, or a piano, or an organ at least. And in So This Is Paris, he does one of his most lavish musical numbers in a silent film, a Charleston contest. It'll blow your mind. It's really a visual tour de force, spectacular. It's like an orgy on film, you know. And so he's anticipating musicals, and he invented the musical, according to Duché. And then when he made actual musicals in 1929 onward, he made some of the best, most innovative musicals. He also invented the romantic comedy along the way. Anyway, so enjoy this wonderful film, and then we'll talk with Nicola and get her reactions and answer your questions. Thank you. This is such a beautiful print. I mean, this film has been, you know, I was mentioning a lot of the silent American films are very hard to see. And as I said, one of the reasons I wrote this book was very selfish. I just wanted to see the films. And so I had to go to Europe and go to different archives and things. But the American period is difficult to see. Lady Windermere's Found is a beautiful DVD of that. I recommend it. Marriage Circle, good DVD. But Three Women is very hard to see. The Patriot is partly lost, mostly lost. Kiss Me Again is totally lost, which was supposed to be one of his best films. Forbidden Paradise is being restored by the Museum of Modern Art. and apparently will show at Pordenone in the fall. That's a wonderful movie, but it's been existing in really horrible-looking Russian dupes for years, like Rosita. Rosita was triumphantly restored by Museum of Modern Art, and apparently will be shown this fall at the Egyptian Theater, I'm told by Dave Kerr. That's why it's not in this retrospective. But, so, you know, it's a spotty thing to see Lubitsch films. So, you know, it's better than it was when I started this book 9 years ago. But around the year 2000, there was almost nothing of his work out on American DVD, and now more and more have come out. Some you can only see on YouTube or whatever. It's you know, it's kind of scandalous because he's such a great director. But you know, I wrote the book also to try to get interest jump-started again on him, which that's one reason I write books. I did that with John Ford twice. You know,
A bunch of his German films are also out on DVD.
yeah.
They're obviously published in Germany, but you can get them.
Yeah, there is a wonderful set from, is it Kino Lorber? It's called Lubitsch in Berlin. Some of the Lubitsch films in a documentary that Nicola is in by Robert Fischer. But a lot of the German films are hard to see. And they just discovered one called the Rosin case, which is the only one now I haven't seen. It's a 19-minute fragment of a detective film he made when he was in 1918. He starred in it and directed it. So things are, you know, petering out.
And it's probably a spoof of the
Yeah.
detective film,
Yeah, it's a
because
spoof of
detective films were unbelievably popular in Germany in the whole war period.
Right. It's kind of he plays his familiar character Sally, and he's a kind of bumbling detective. But Nicola, you had never seen this film before, huh?
No.
So tell us your reactions.
Oh, my reaction. I love the dance part. I always love all my father's things that have to do with dance. I think it was just magical. It reminds me, it's kind of, I mean, it's just an extraordinary scene, really, isn't it?
And he had done it before. He did it in I Don't Want to Be a Man, Ich möchte kein Mann sein. There's not quite as extravagant, but there's a scene like that in that film.
And The Oyster Princess.
And in The Oyster
I
Princess.
mean,
And
which
then
is remarkable.
A Merry Widow, there's a fantastic embassy ball. Those are the most spectacular tour de force dance scenes in his films.
Right.
But the musicals are all wonderful. But it's a spectacular eruption. It's like an explosion almost, that sequence. Really a tour de force. John Mescal was a cinematographer, by the way.
Can we change seats? I keep
Oh,
back and forth. I don't.
where would you like to sit?
I want to sit
Let's
here
switch
because otherwise
microphones.
my neck
Okay.
No,
hurts.
that's fine.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah, you
So
too
much
happy.
better. Yes.
You said
I'm
a
a
lot-
director's daughter. You know.
Yes,
I
of
think you
course.
told me a lot of your memories of your father revolve around music, don't they?
They do. He was very musical when I was little. He used to play the piano and tell me stories. He'd come back from the studio, and he couldn't read music, but he absolutely loved to play. And it didn't matter who was at our house, if it was Horowitz or Rubinstein. It would be Daddy at the piano, sort of playing kind of Lubitsch music from Lubitsch land. It was no particular, it wasn't Strauss or any of that kind of thing. It was just totally his music. And he would make up incredible stories and make a kind of wonderland. When I would go to sleep at night also, I would hear him playing the piano. So, and I have the piano. It was a wedding present.
On one of the DVDs, I think it's Trouble in Paradise, they have some of his music.
Right.
You gave that to them,
And
I presume.
yeah, they got the music, and it was actually the one thing I did that I recorded that I liked. That little memory of him. Yeah.
There are some beautiful pictures you put on Facebook recently of you playing the piano with your dad, too, right?
Yeah. Or faking it.
Faking it.
Faking it.
Yeah.
Faking it.
Yeah.
They made me take piano lessons.
Oh, yeah.
From when I was very little. I didn't like to practice or anything, but I did inherit a tremendous love of music from him. And my cousin, my father's niece, also loved music. She, as a much older woman, because she would have been in her hundreds now It was all kind of, my father was 20 years younger than his closest sibling. So he was he was spoiled and musical, and his cousin, his niece, lived in Lincoln Center and would go over every year at New Year's Eve to hear whatever was at the opera, Fledermaus or the Rosenkavalier or whatever.
Oh, you mentioned
Incredibly
Fledermaus. I
musical.
should say that this play that this is based on is partly the source of Die Fledermaus, the famous opera. And Lubitsch had made a film in Germany called The Merry Jail in 1917, which was based on the same play. So they're all kind of interrelated about a man who goes to jail and a mixture, you know, a comedy of errors with a married couple. And so it's he loved opera and he loved operettas, and a lot of his films derive from the culture of that period, you know, the Wilhelmine Empire or the Viennese.
Well, I read in your book that he saved his first money and bought a cello, which I didn't know.
Yeah.
We had a cello actually sitting in our living room, but I never ever saw him play it. But looked good.
Well, his films
impressive.
are profoundly musical. I mean, the rhythms and the Peter Bogdanovich, who's seated here, by the way, has made some of the best Lubitsch homages over here. I love At Long Lost Love in particular, underrated film, really beautiful tribute to Lubitsch, the most lavish Lubitsch homage in motion pictures. But Peter pointed out that the characters in his talking pictures have a certain rhythm that's Lubitchian, you can identify, and he acted out all the parts since he was an actor. That's considered a no-no for most directors, but the actors seemed to enjoy it because he was funny. And Jack Benny said to Peter, well, it was a little broad, but you got the idea. You know? And so the rhythm is somehow the speech of your dad comes across in the films. Do you notice that in your when you watch his talking pictures? There's a kind of Lubitchian way of talking.
I don't think I've ever really thought about that. There are no extra words, though. There are no extra scenes. Everything is there because it needs to be there, which is the complete opposite of film today. Nobody understands anymore that less is more, you know. And in case you don't get it, they'll repeat it over and over, which is one thing my father never did. He always, I think I know that he expected you to be intelligent, and he expected you to get it. And that, to me, is the Lubitsch touch. Counting on your intelligence, your sense of fantasy, of magic, of wonderland.
What's really amazing about this film is that there is that economy, and yet everything, I mean literally everything, from the body movements, the hand movements, to what you read as titles, has multiple meanings and floors that open up and drop you into other meanings. And it is unbelievably complex, even though the film as a whole, if you try to boil it down to a plot, it's a trifle, right?
Right.
But nevertheless.
I was thinking there's a great quote from G.K. Chesterton, who I love. He said, "It's very easy to be solemn, and it's very hard to be frivolous." You know, and this is a frivolous film, but it has an underpinning of pain, or you know, like it's not quite as emotional as some of the Lubitsch comedies, but a lot of the comedies have to do with marital misunderstandings and infidelities and real hurt, you know, but a comic approach to life, solving life's problems.
I think the scene where I really fell in love with Lubitsch's American period is in Three Women, a film I know you don't like as much, but the scene of Pauline Frederick, when looking in the mirror and realizing that her daughter is taking her lover away from her.
Oh, I like that
and
scene.
That is, I mean, that scene is unbelievably powerful.
Yeah.
For me.
It's one of the few Lubitsch films taking place in the United States. Even in Berkeley, it takes place at UC Berkeley, part of it, although it's filmed in Burbank, I think. But, one footnote to this film, tomorrow I hope you come and see Ninotchka and Shop Around the Corner, two of his great masterpieces. And this film is partly responsible for Ninotchka, oddly enough, because Greta Garbo loved this film. And you don't normally think of Greta Garbo as somebody who loves comic romps, but she wanted to do a comedy, and so she wanted to do a film with Lubitsch, and she flipped over this film so much that she and Lillian Tashman, who's so wonderful as Georgette, had a wild romance because of this film, And then she wanted to work with Lubitsch, and he met her, and he said, "God, my God, we got to make a film together. Those idiots at MGM got to put us together, So, who has questions for us? Nicola, any questions about Lubitsch as a father? Or, yeah.
Up there?
Well, I started wondering how young Ernst Lubitsch was when he started making films, and how he got started making films.
He was he was born in 1892. He directed his first film in 1913. He was with the Max Reinhardt Theater Company, which was the most prestigious theater company in Europe, and he was a stage actor. And then he started acting in motion pictures in 1913. So he would have been 21. It was a period when very young people were getting into films. And then he made a film called The Pride of the Firm, which somebody else directed, which was a big hit, where he played a comical shop clerk. And it drew from his own life. His father was a women's tailor, and he wanted Ernst to be a clerk or an accountant, and he was a complete failure at that. He bumbling, wasn't interested in business, etc. And so he made movies where he played that kind of a character, and then he directed his own version of it called Shoe Palace Pincus, which is a charming film. And audiences loved him as the schlemiel character, and then he got more and more confident, and the films were very broad at first, and then they got more and more subtle, and he started experimenting in different genres.
But the apprentices appear in virtually every
Right.
Lubitsch film. The shopkeeper's apprentices are always there. It's Shop Around the
Shop
Corner.
Around the Corner tomorrow.
And they're always characters very dear to his heart, and they're always very bad.
Yeah, the character played by William Tracy tomorrow is this kind of a mischievous shop clerk, and he's really the Lubitsch character in that film. Although Lubitsch's alter ego is probably Felix Bressart, who's his lovely character actor. But Shop Around the Corner is so personal to him because that's, his dad and mother ran the shop. And when I went to Berlin to research this book, their apartments are still there. The parents had one floor, the children had another. The clothing was made on the ground floor, and the shop was at the corner, and it's now a beauty salon. And across the street is where Ernst was born, the building has been torn down. It was a Cajun restaurant when I was there. But it's the shop around the corner, and so he was making a movie about his life. And Nicola, you told me you see a lot of his family and his background in his films, don't you?
I do. I mean, I see very personal things, but don't you think that's sort of like writing a book too?
Yeah.
You bring a lot of yourself, and things are autobiographical.
Yeah, it's not unusual, but it's good to know, because when we know that, we care more about the milieu and the characters, don't we? Yeah. What are some, like, I don't know, in this film, since it's new to you.
I don't know, but Bluebeard's Eighth Wife, which I don't know if anybody's seen it, but in the movie,
It's
Gary
coming in
Cooper,
the series.
Yeah, he meets Claudette Colbert. They meet buying pajamas, and he's buying the tops, and she's buying the bottoms. Well, my father only wore tops. Big. So that's that's taken from his life.
Any other questions out there? Yeah, right up front, right here. We wait for a microphone so the people in back can hear you.
I read online just recently that your father had a first wife named Lenny, and she had an affair with the screenwriter of this movie, Hans Crayley.
Yes.
Did that end their collaboration, and did it end the first marriage?
It definitely did end on that. And the story is Pancho, Daddy who never lost what? Crowley, right.
Crowley wrote a lot of the silent films, most of the silent films. He's a very good writer.
When this incident happened, which is they were on the dance floor and Daddy went up and hit Hans Crowley, slapped him in the face. Which is, I've never ever heard my father raise his voice, lose his temper, anything. So that would be the one time.
very sad story. But then he moved on to the great Samson Raphaelson, who wrote a lot of his greatest films, including Shop Around the Corner, and then he worked with Billy Wilder and Walter Reich and Charles Brackett and Ninotchka. He worked with the best writers, but Wilder said Lubitsch was the greatest writer in the world, and he said, I don't mean screenwriter, I mean the greatest writer in the world. You know, I mean, he worked on the scripts. The writers of Ninotchka actually petitioned the Writers Guild to put Lubitsch's name on the credits, which is almost unheard of in Hollywood. And the Guild said, no, we don't want a director's name on the credits. But the writers were so enamored with him, and they loved collaborating with him.
And Hans Kreli, who had really worked on almost all of the later German films and all the American films.
Mm-hmm.
His
silent
career
films,
really,
yeah.
after Lubitsch, he ended up in B pictures and
Yeah, sad
worked
story.
very
Yeah.
irregularly. It was ended up pretty.
Yeah. Who else has a question?
I would love to ask Peter
Yeah.
to say something about my father. You're here and you're one of the great admirers of his, and I always love to read what you say about him. And would you mind just? You would. Okay.
I asked Jean Renoir once what he thought of Lubitsch, and Renoir said, Lubitsch? He invented the modern Hollywood. By which he meant that in 1924, 25, when he came over here, the movies were largely influenced by Griffith. But when Lubitsch came here, he changed the sort of puritanical, square sexual mores in America and brought the European touch and the European charm to the movies. And as you said, he invented the musical, movie musical with the Love Parade. And he made 5 of the best musicals ever made. I think The Merry Widow is a masterpiece. But he didn't make a bad film, you know. He was great. The story about Jack Benny is funny, that you already told. But what actually happened is I said to Jack, is it true that Lubitsch acted out all the parts? And he said, yes. And I said, well, was he any good? And that's when he said, well, he was a little broad, but you got the idea. Yeah. And Signe Hasso, a name from the past, who played the French maid in Heaven Can Wait. I asked her about Lubitsch, and she said, yes, he played all the parts. Even the French maid, she said he was very good as the French maid. It's not common that that actors tolerate the director giving them line readings and so on. I remember when I did a picture with Streisand, and I gave her a line reading, and her agent called me and said, "You're giving Streisand line readings?" I said, "Well, she doesn't have to do it exactly the way I said it, just an idea." And so people don't, actors don't generally like that. But with Lubitsch, it's true that they have a certain rhythm, his talking pictures, whether it's Gary Cooper or Melvin Douglas or Herbert Marshall, they all have a certain rhythm when in the talking pictures. And his sound was very good for Lubitsch. He knew how to use it. In 1929, when everybody in Hollywood was saying, sound, what are we going to do, Jesus? And a lot of the movies were very stiff and very old-fashioned. Lubitsch does a musical. He said, "The hell with it, I got sound, I can do a musical." And it's extraordinary. And I'm so glad Joe wrote this book, because it does say how Lubitsch did it. And to a degree, because the mystery of personality is hard to define. But it's a great book. I suggest you all read it. It's just wonderfully written, and you really have a sense of Lubitsch from the book. Joe's done a great job. And I think the fact that you're doing this Lubitsch festival here is just great, because they don't come any better than Lubitsch, I'll tell you that. And we could use a little Lubitsch right now, as the movie business stinks.
It's Peter, it's interesting you mentioned Renoir, because watching the Charleston scene, I kept thinking of Renoir's first short and whether he saw this when he made Le Charleston in 1926, a year after this.
Yeah, That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Thank you for the comments, Peter.
My pleasure.
When Peter and I were
Thank
in
you.
an Orson Welles film, Orson used to give line readings to me anyway, because I was not an actor. But he would always preface it by saying, it's terrible for a director to give an actor a line reading, but, and then he'd give me the line reading. And I was so pleased because I was not an actor and I was delighted. But the other director who would act out all the parts was Chaplin. And I once mentioned that to John Ford. I said, you know, Chaplin and Lubitsch acted out all the parts. I was trying to get Ford to talk about directing actors, which was impossible, you know. But he said, well, I'd like to see that. That must have been funny, you know. So Lubitsch violated that. But I guess they loved, I mean, he was a lovable character and he was a funny actor. And, you know, I mean, if he's playing Jean Tierney, she gets the idea, but she's not going to imitate Lubitsch directly, but she gets sort of the broad picture. But I guess one of the cameramen, I found an interview where he said that Lubitsch, he started secretly filming Lubitsch acting out the parts, and he put it in the rushes, and Lubitsch was so thrilled. He said, oh, please do that every time, you know. I love this stuff, you know. I mean, he was an actor, and then he gave up acting. He wasn't a great actor, but he knew that, and he channeled himself through better actors. But you know, he was a ham his whole life, and he loved doing that, and that's part of his, I think that's part of why the actors are so good in his films. He brought out the best in all these people who, you know, like Kay Francis, I've never been a big fan of, but when I saw her in Trouble in Paradise, which was the first Lubitsch film I ever saw, I thought, wow, she's so wonderful and sexy and soignée and everything. And started watching her other films, and she's kind of stiff and, you know, not very interesting. And I thought, well, you know, Lubitsch brought that out in her. The best that people have in them, he found and helped encourage.
Yes. Wait, can you wait a second for the microphone?
Thank you. Just a question, why is the makeup on the men so exaggerated? Like the lipstick and the eyes?
It's actually not exaggerated. The problem was, in 1925, the film stock they were using was called orthochromatic film stock, and it was a film stock that could not capture red tones. So Caucasians who have a lot of red tones in their skin, it wouldn't turn out. So the actors would have to put on white makeup to cover up the red tones from their skin. So they and that's why you see these gradations on their faces. It's from the makeup, and there wasn't anything to do about it until 2 years later they invented what was called panchromatic film stock, which captured the full spectrum of light in black and white, but the early film stock didn't.
That's true, and also another interesting thing, Monty Blue, who plays the lead in this film, he's so terrific in The Marriage Circle and in a little more serious part. He was Native American. His name was Montgomery Bluefeather, actually.
Really?
And yeah, and he was a stuntman, and Lubitsch turned this strapping stuntman, kind of clownish character into a leading man. He liked the clownishness of Monty Blue, and he's charming in these films, but he is kind of buffoonish, and the makeup kind of fits that, I think, you know. He's not Ronald Colman, who was in another Lubitsch film, but he's a, you know, he's everyman kind of character that all of us are, as Lubitsch said, all of us are foolish at least once a day, you know.
Keeping up with other foolishness is all the way in the back there.
Thank you. What I think fascinates me most about Lubitsch is his gift of connecting with actresses. I think he and Cukor are neck and neck for just having that gift like no other. As you mentioned, he managed to make Kay Francis sexy. He managed to make Garbo laugh. I think it was Carrie Beecham who said he was the only director who could make Jeanette MacDonald be sexy. And I wanted to ask Miss Lubitsch what she thinks her father had that he was able to connect with actresses in that way.
I think he loved women. I mean, he really did.
He was a feminist, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. He was a feminist. He came from a family of very strong women. There were business women in the family and great joie de vivre. And I think he really just loved women. And I think that comes out in all of his films. And I think he was way ahead of his time in his attitude towards women. If you come and see I Don't Want to Be a Man, or if you've seen it, you know that. I mean, they're so far ahead, especially the German silents, I think, are incredibly advanced and very feminist. I mean, really feminist. So I think when you love somebody, when you like them so much, when you admire them, that comes through. I mean, it's not a man trying to control his women. It's somebody with affection and understanding that they're working for because they love him. I think that's really it. It's
There was
a connection.
I found an article that Elsa Schallert, who was a writer for the LA Times, a good show business writer, she said she had interviewed many directors and she had never found one who understood women as much as Lubitsch. And he would make some very shrewd and loving but analytical comments about his actresses' personalities, and I quote them in the book. And one thing I did was I found a lot of interviews with him. He was interviewed a lot in Germany and the US, and these are kind of forgotten interviews, but he was extremely eloquent about his methods. And since he's been dead for so long, and we haven't had the benefit of hearing interviews with him in later years like a lot of directors did, but he gave these interviews, and I found a lot of them. And also Paramount had some very good press releases at the time. They would interview him, and sometimes he'd write the press releases, and Howard Prouty at the Academy helped me find these. And these are like gold, It's Lubitsch explaining his own method, which has been kind of forgotten that this stuff exists. So it's kind of his voice is heard in the book, I think,
Is that in your book?
Yeah.
I haven't
yeah,
finished yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Go ahead, right there. Where's the mic?
Where are we? Yeah. Oh, over here. Yeah. What a beautiful
Keeps you
theater.
in shape,
this is.
Nate.
Yeah. It's the first time I've been here. Beautiful theater. Wow. God. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
First, I just wanted to say that I love Broken Lullaby. It's, I think, a very heartfelt film. It doesn't really get played, even though I think it was recently a remake of it. But I was, first of all, curious if he ever talked about it, what he thought about it, since it wasn't a comedy, but I think a very sincere film. And secondly, about his method that you were discussing. I was thinking most of the later films are adaptations. Even Heaven Can Wait is from a German play, and so many of the other work are adaptations. Did he have like a whole store of stuff that he was looking at to make, or how is it that he came up with subject matters since so much was adaptation?
I was always curious, where did he find, it was kind of a joke in Hollywood, where did he find all these obscure Hungarian plays? They're usually Hungarian plays. I think I couldn't really always find out where did he locate this play, but what happened in those days, the studio system was great with story departments, and they had readers. They would scour the world for plays and novels. He rarely adapted a novel. Clooney Brown was an exception, but usually a play. And they would have reports, and the directors would read these reports, and then they'd say, oh, or actually, I mean, he'd seen a lot of these plays when he was younger, in Europe, and he was in a lot of plays, and some of them are good, and you can find the originals, but he always improved upon them. And Broken Lullaby was based on a French play, and it's got some creaky elements, but parts of it are very moving. When it becomes a romantic comedy, it becomes most interesting to me. It's this very tragic World War I story, but when it becomes very bizarre, a soldier falls in love with the girlfriend of a soldier he's killed, and it becomes a strange love story. And then Lubitsch really is firing on all cylinders. He periodically made heavy dramas, I think because comedies are undervalued, unfortunately, even, of course, today. And so he felt the need to do something really serious, quote, serious, and those are not always his best films, but he did tragic films like De Flamma was a real tragic film, very good film, at least the part that exists. The Patriot, again, partly missing. Rausch, which was based on a Strindberg play. So he would do these heavy dramas once in a while.
Yep. Funny thing about those Hungarian screenwriters, because their agent was a guy named George Martin, who had a shop in Vienna and was a literary agent. And the writers, the Hungarian writers working for him, they would write plays in Hollywood, and then he would sell them as Hungarian plays that had actually been published in Hungary when they hadn't.
That's really funny.
I mean, I know of Ladislaus Fodor was one of those who did that. With Gina Kraus in Germany, they wrote several plays which they sold to Hollywood studios as plays, which were nothing but scripts that they had written.
Oh, that's so devious.
Because they knew the Hollywood studios would buy them if they were plays, because they said, well, somebody must have produced it. Right, so.
Well, there was an old joke in Hollywood, it's not enough to be Hungarian, one must also have talent. Yeah. But Hungarians were known for their tremendous cleverness and wiles like that. I guess that's an example.
And there's also the example of if you go through a revolving door with a Hungarian behind you, he'll come out ahead.
Yeah. But you can read, for example, the play that Shop Around the Corner is based on is published. You can read that, and it's a pretty good play, but Lubitsch and his writers improved upon it, you know.
We had another question over there. Yes, ma'am. Hold on, the microphone's coming.
It's a question, I think, mostly for Mr. McBride about the Charleston sequence. I'm just wondering, first of all, if you had any research on that, the kind of the making of that and the concept.
No, I didn't find out much about that, unfortunately. It's just spectacular to watch, and the set is astounding. Harold Grieve did the sets, and Lubitsch shows the best of the studio system. They had such resources of craftsmen and crowds, and he had a huge number of people in Merry Widow and that great dance number with mirrors and things and all kinds of spectacular stuff. And so it's kind of his spectacle side. In Germany, he was known for spectacles, and when you see, it might be surprising to people to think of him as a director of light comedies, that he did some very heavy historical spectacles with huge crowds in Germany. He was great with crowds. He had a sense, and Reinhardt was famous for directing crowds, and he learned how to orchestrate crowd movement from Reinhardt, and I suppose you could trace that to Reinhardt to some extent.
Because that's what I'm curious about.
Yeah.
There's no choreography per se, but somebody staged the hell out of that. I mean,
Yeah.
there's just a lot of bodies in there.
Well, he probably had some good help that isn't credited. In those days, very few names got on the screen, but there were a lot of craftsmen and women that didn't get credit who deserve a lot of credit.
One of Max Reinhardt's most famous presentations, it was a pantomime called The Miracle, and that was staged also in New York in 1923 with a cast of thousands, literally.
Yeah.
And again, Lubitsch was in 1912 as an extra in one of those Miracle productions that Reinhardt did.
And he did, Sumerun was based on a pantomime which Reinhardt had done on stage, and Lubitsch made a film of it. That was Lubitsch's last acting performance. He played a Arabian hunchback, very strange film. It's interesting to see. He was really going all out for tragedy and pathos. He thought Chaplin was the greatest of all film performers and the greatest actor in the world, and he was always kind of in awe of Chaplin. So he was, but Lubitsch is a tremendous way he blends comedy and drama. There's always, as Andrew Sarris said, the Lubitsch touch is not just leering sexuality, there's an undercurrent of melancholy all the time, which gives it its depth, its character depth. And there's a sadness, and like, for example, when he creates these mythical kingdoms or these beautiful artificial worlds, you kind of know that they don't exist, they can't exist, or they're gone. He's kind of eulogizing a world that existed and then died, in World War I. And he was also, as a Jewish person, he would have been excluded from those societies. So you get that feeling of kind of on the outside looking in. He wished he were part of it, but he knew he wasn't, and he was making fun of it at the same time. There's a complex tone. But in the romantic comedies, there's always kind of an undertone of sadness. Like Patsy Ruth Miller, I think, is very good in this film. You really feel for her. Her husband is foolish philanderer, and she's home with her. You know, that scene where her feet are tapping, on the radio. That's just a simple scene, but it's very poignant, and he could do that. He could bring out poignancy with those moments. So and then when they reconcile, and then he shrinks to that little tiny thing. It's very satisfying, isn't it? Yeah. Another question?
Right up there.
Yeah.
Wait, over there first.
Thank you again for doing this. One of the things I've found most fascinating about Lubitsch's films is that for a period in the 20s and the early 30s, they all seem to be set in Lubitsch land, basically, imaginary worlds, countries with imaginary names. And then as the 30s went on, politics seemed to invade Lubitsch land, and you start to see more of that in Angel, Ninotchka, of course, To Be or Not to Be, and in Clooney Brown. I was wondering if you could speak about Lubitsch as a political being.
Well, in my book, I write a lot about the socio-political background of Lubitsch, as I do with all my director subjects, because I think it's very important to know where they came from, what context they came from. But I think it's kind of an illusion that he's apolitical. There were people who claimed he was, and some left-wing critics in the German period would attack him for being not sufficiently political. But actually, those historical films are, they're all about politics. But they tended to view politics through a prism of human behavior and sexuality rather than through, the masses or through Marxist theory or something. He was a dramatist. He worked with people. But I think a lot of his films are very political, but they're it's subtle, it's disguised. Trouble in Paradise, for example, is about the Great Depression. It's full of economic references, and it's full of references to the world situation. And somebody wrote that they thought he made a trilogy of great political films, Trouble in Paradise about capitalism, Ninotchka about communism, Stalinism, and To Be or Not to Be about fascism, And what partly happened was in the mid-30s during the Depression, the audience's taste changed. They didn't want to see the mythical kingdom films as much. They were not doing as well at the box office because Capra's It Happened One Night was a huge hit. And that was the kind of film that the audience wanted to see more of, the proletarian type film. And Lubitsch adapted, to that to some extent. With Shop Around the Corner is about ordinary people's lives. And he said at one point in an interview, we have to start showing how people earn their living. It's not enough just to show them in drawing rooms having fun. We have to deal with reality as it is. And so the world changed. He changed his style and his outlook 3 or 4 times in his career. He was very adaptable. That helps account for his long career. And I have a theory that comic directors usually last about 10 years before the audience kind of abandons them. And there are a lot of examples, like Sturgis and Capra had great 10-year runs, and then nobody was interested. Tashlin, yeah, Jerry Lewis. But Lubitsch lasted a long time because he was adaptable and he was rich. He had many facets to him. And in Germany, he made all these different kinds of films. And so and when censorship came in really hard in 1934, he took a hiatus and reconsidered his style and became even more subtle. When you see Angel, it's astonishing how subtle that film is. It's kind of his belle du jour, but he got away with it somehow. And the censors once said, "We know what he's saying, we don't know how he's saying it." he was so subtle, but he would keep changing. But Billy Wilder told me in the 70s. He said, "I don't think Lubitsch." He said, "I think Lubitsch would have a hard time in this market today," and that was the 70s. Can you imagine today?
Well, Wilder was having a hard time.
Well, Wilder was trying to do Lubitchian films, and he was having a hard time.
But I was going to, Lubitsch was also political in his life. I mean, he was one of the founders of the Hollywood Anti-Nazi League, and was actively engaged in that until some friends told him there were too many communists in it, and then he kind of quietly got out of it. But he was also a huge supporter of the European Film Fund, which brought refugees, most German-speaking Jewish filmmakers from Vienna and Berlin to Los Angeles and got them their first jobs. And he was heavily invested in that with his financially too. So
with Paul Kohner.
With Paul
Paul
Kohner
Kohner
and
and
with William
Dieterle and Dieterle's wife.
Charlotte
And
Dieterle. So
they all got people. They got a lot of people to contribute part of their weekly salary for this fund to support refugees, which was a very important thing to do, and they saved a lot of people. And that was his direct action, you know. And so then when he makes films like Ninotchka and To Be or Not to Be, there, you know, it's not a. They didn't come out of nowhere. I mean, he really didn't like totalitarianism of any kind. Ninotchka is one of the few anti-communist films, I would say, maybe the only one ever made in Hollywood you can watch without embarrassment today, because he really nailed Stalinism at a time when a lot of people were acting blind towards Stalinism. He understood it. He was actually a Russian citizen early in life because his father was from Russia, and he avoided service in World War I because he was a Russian. And so he knew Russia, and he had been to Stalin's Russia and was appalled by things. And he wrote that line in there. Somebody said to Ninotchka, "How are things going in Russia?" And she said, "Great, the last mass trials were a great success. There are going to be fewer but better Russians." He wrote that line himself, you know. So that's a very political line, a very daring line for 1939. You know.
right here in the middle.
Yes, I wanted to ask Nicola, what would you like us to know about your father?
Oh, that's a really hard question. I don't even know really how to answer that. I think he was a man of incredible taste, of kindness and gentleness and warmth, a very private person. Here's an interesting aspect. Things meant absolutely nothing to him. Things in our house were bought by the secretary. He would say, "Go out and buy silver." He said to his chauffeur, "Go and buy a big black car," when the car broke down. So as I have watched his films over the year, and the more I think about it, it's extraordinary that a man that was so invested in his films, in things and objects and beautiful settings, that didn't matter to him at all. He loved his house, but it was a very comfortable, unostentatious Mexican house with, you know, it was beautiful, but it wasn't a Hollywood house at all. We didn't have a screening room. We didn't have fish painted on the bottom of our swimming pool, and we didn't have a slide with water coming down it. You know, when I went to Jack Warner's with my friend Linda Leroy, when I was little, I couldn't believe it. I mean, there was an octopus at the bottom of a pool, and there were all these fish, and you went down this slide. It was absolutely terrifying. I mean, I just lived in an ordinary house. So I guess he didn't drive. He didn't run. He didn't know how to do anything. I mean, he really didn't. He didn't read music, but he played the piano. He was very indulged by his family. He was the youngest of four. His oldest brother became a pediatrician. His sister indulged him, was like a second mother to him, and would go to school with him to change his shoes. So when he went from gym to regular thing, he didn't know how to tie his shoelaces. I'm not making this up. I'm really not. My mother said once she asked him to pull the curtains, and he just pulled them down. So nobody ever asked him to do anything. Really. So I guess he didn't like cheese, so he never went in the kitchen, and he wouldn't let my mother eat cheese. Seriously. So, and he lived in his own world, you know. When he would come back from work, we would sit in his study, and he would eat these horrible cookies that I had baked on my toy stove that were like hard as bricks, and we would listen to quiz programs and try and guess, what the answers were, and they were awarding you silver dollars. He ate the same thing for breakfast every single day, prunes, and some kind of cereal, and we had the same thing for lunch, cold cuts. And we had squab on Sundays. So that's my father. He was a wonderful, wonderful father.